I'm Ніл Янг. I'm a critic and programmer from the UK. I write for various magazines in Britain and elsewhere, including Hollywood Reporter. I'm here for Sight and Sound, Little White Lies, Tribune, and I'm here on the Fipressi jury of the Odessa International Film Festival. I work with some film festivals at home in Bradford, at the National Media Museum in Yorkshire, and also the Biennale, which is the biggest film festival in Austria. Yes, because as well as the short films and the feature films, I watched some of the forgotten masterpieces of Ukrainian cinema. 3 films I saw from the 1930s and 1960s, which obviously gives some background. And then of the current films, the feature films are what I would say cinema of the present, and the short films are perhaps indicating which way the Ukrainian cinema might develop in the next few years. Well, for instance, in the short film which we gave our prize to, Balagère, by Lesia Kodanets, this film directly has Ukrainian people speaking directly to the camera, talking about where Ukraine is and where it has been, relationships with Russia or EU, ideologies, things like this. So in these films we get a very direct, it's not so much a mirror, it's more like a piece of glass for me, because I'm not seeing myself, I'm not Ukrainian, although of course in Britain we also have ideology, we also have to deal with the past. We have a difficult relationship with Europe, because in Britain we have a big neighbour on one side, United States, even though it's not so close geographically, but it's very much on our shoulder, shall we say, and then we have to deal with Europe. So really from my perspective, you know, there are similarities between Britain and Ukraine, although they might not be obvious at first. So yes, one can see a mirror. Everybody has to deal with ideologies, because that is how human society has been based since it began. And you can call ideology different things, but it boils down to somebody else telling you how society is going to operate, and everybody has to deal with that. And obviously within Ukraine you have a position of the history of Russia, and then Soviet Union, and then Ukraine as an individual entity, which is still really only 23 years old. And we could even say that it is only, well, less than 1 year old, because we could say that Maidan is a kind of rebirth of Ukraine and really independent. But to what degree can any country be really independent? I can think of only one really independent country in the world, and that's North Korea. Okay. Do we really want to be like that? I particularly liked the film Crepuscule, or Prismerk, by Valentin Vazyanovich. This is a 62-minute documentary about life in the rural parts of Ukraine, and of course Ukraine is a huge country, bigger than Spain, one of the biggest countries in Europe, and so most of it is not like Odessa, marvelous as Odessa is. Most people, you know, still live in well, not say most people, but still many people live in these rural areas. And so, you know, Odessa and, Ukraine was always known as like the breadbasket of Europe or the world or Soviet Union. And so to actually go back to this farming tradition, this is the 21st century, and this film could have been made in 1923 or something, you know, or 1823, because the tools they're using are often very old tools. But I think Crepuscule is interesting because it's specifically about this people in Ukraine, but it's also about how you approach life, because for me the son is kind of a negative person and the mother is a very positive person, and this often happens within families. Like my father and my mother are like this, one of them is positive and one of them is negative, and I don't know why it's always the woman who's positive, but there we are. So I think this film will have a universal appeal, and I expect it to play in quite a lot of festivals, and it's not going to be a box office smash, it's not going to be like Transformers, because it's 60 minutes documentary about Ukrainian farm, but I think in terms of exposure and travelling around the world's festivals, I think this film will be a very good export for Ukraine. Yes, it was a very interesting discussion, because as all good discussions should be, not everybody agreed, and you didn't just have everybody saying, hurrah, Loznica, you were a genius. You know, there were people standing up saying, I was in Maidan and you did not show the truth. The thing that surprised me was how much there is about the church in the film, because I followed Maidan quite closely and I had no idea that the church was... No, I mean in terms of news.
уряда. Їх було надзвичайно багато на Майдані. Вони складали з моєї точки зору десятки людей.
Yeah, in Britain this was not so widely reported, which perhaps because in Britain we're a very kind of secular country, and to present a revolution or a anti-government protest as somehow religious inspired in Britain would be, I don't know, this is the news agenda of what we get, because everything we get goes through the filter of editors, and so this is Loznitz's vision of what he saw. And of course, you know, you can only look in one place at a time unless you have 50 screens going on at once. So no, I think as a record, historical record, I think the film is very important, because it's, in one way, it's very simple and direct, and it appears to be, here is what happened at Maidan, but of course we know that these things are more complicated than that. But I think the fact that it is so simple and it is so direct, in 20 or 30 years, I don't think it will look dated. Whereas if you had lots of music and commentary and different things and editing, then it would date quickly. But yes, the discussion was very interesting, because Loznitsa basically said, this is my Maidan. If you have a different Maidan, please show me what it is. You know, and of course people don't have to make a film. You could do a painting. You could do, like, you know, you could make a ballet of Maidan, and that would be your response to that. So yeah, but obviously he was very fortunate in that he was in Maidan with very good cameras, and he's obviously a very good director who knows how to frame an image, so he has certain advantages. But you know, there's nothing stopping anybody in Maidan from saying, and I'm sure people will be writing books, and I'm sure there'll be lots of records about it, and of course it's not over, because just because the protests are over, you know, the Maidan era is continuing, and how this affects the future of Ukraine, and if Poroshenko is the answer, we're still discovering this. Well, this started in 1999, when the internet was quite young, shall we say, and a friend of mine was setting up a website, and he said, do you want to do some stuff? And I said, well, I'd like to write film reviews, which I had never really done in an organised way, and at this point I was 28 years old, so it's never too late to start. And this is 15 years later, the website is still going, and it's basically an archive for my writing, although we also have some other writers who occasionally will do reports from film festivals or writing for that. But 97% of it is me. And when I started doing the website, I was really just doing it for the website, but then I started writing for other magazines and other articles, and sometimes I will reproduce those articles on the website as an archive. But I think, you know, these days with the internet, there's no excuse for anybody can have a blog even, or it's WordPress or whatever you want to call it. It's free. And if you're a good enough writer, and if you are seeing interesting films, it's like anybody can go and see, you know, Transformers or Fast and the Furious. But if you actually go and see some interesting films that people might not, there might not be 1,000 reviews of Cripple School. And if you can write an interesting review of Cripple School, you'll get people reading that outlet, because people want to know what's out there in the world of cinema. There's never been as many films being made as there are today, even though with financial crisis and money. Should we wait? So, right. Even with the financial crisis that we have, which has obviously impacted on film production, so many countries are making films now, and people have access to technology. So you have access to make a film with a camera like this, or a small camera, and then other person can have access to doing a blog or publishing things. And maybe the same person can make a film and write about film. You know, there shouldn't be this. You know, in France, many of the great directors were also critics. Peter Bogdanovich was a critic before he became Paul Schrader. So there are many examples of people who are actually working on both sides of the line, but there is no line, because, you know, in the morning take a camera and make a film, in the afternoon write about somebody else's film. So, but all you got to then do is somehow make money from it. That's the catch. Well, considering it's only the 5th time that this festival has happened, it is more advanced than many festivals that I know which have had 10 or 15 or even 20 events. I think the benefit of the great thing that the festival has is that it's happening in Odessa, which is a city that everybody's heard of and everybody wants to visit. So if I say to somebody, please come to, you know, Minsk, they might be like, oh, I'm not going to go to Minsk. But if they say, Odessa, Pearl of the Black Sea, you know, then you can get guests to come. And it will always have an exotic feel to it, regardless of what happens. So I think the great strength that the festival has is Odessa, and of course you have the steps of immortalized in Eisenstein. You have great places to walk around, great locations, and yes, in 5 years the festival has managed to make a place for itself. But there are so many film festivals these days going on. Karlovy Vary just finished, which is a festival which has been going for 50 years. And to actually kind of find your position in this ecology can be difficult because you're competing for films, you're competing with guests, and Odessa Film Festival is developing its own identity, like the country is. And where that is up to the organisers and the public what kind of films they want to see. I mean, I think maybe if people wander in the Приватбанk market here, how many people there are going to see films at Odessa Film Festival? It's the price of a ticket is 50 hryvnia, which doesn't sound like very much to Britain because that's £2.50. But if I go to the shashlik bar across the street, I can buy 3 pints of beer for that price. So
Like I love Ukraine.
this is it. So the beer is cheap, but the tickets of the audience is very young. At the festival, you see a lot of young people, students, and all this kind of thing. Whether Odessa International Film Festival can do more to attract kind of the people on the tram, you know, the Tatra tram that runs through the city. How many people on that tram that I was on yesterday would go and see a film at this film festival? And it's all very well having the red carpet, but what I personally don't think that film festivals should be this hidden, glamorous Hollywood type thing. I think a film festival should engage with the city. And if a film festival is in a city like Odessa, where there is a curiosity about life, and there is a cosmopolitan thing with different people from different nationalities, I think a film festival should reflect the city where it is, and not just be something where you beam in British journalists and Stephen Frears and John Malkovich. It should be, everybody should know about it and want to be part of it. And maybe that means having some, because there are other cinemas in Odessa which could be used, some neighborhood cinema, have a repetition of maybe the Guide or Maidan or something like this, and make the tickets a little bit cheaper so that people can go and see. Maybe have some free screenings in the open air at Приватбанk one night.
They had one in Potemkinska Square.
Yeah, but I mean, what I mean is in kind of, you know, Potemkin Stairs is terrific, but it's in a certain part of the city and it's like a tourist thing and all that, and it's terrific. What I mean is bring the festival to. This is a city of 1 million people, and 950,000 of them won't be seeing any films. So bring the festival to them, and yes, have the red carpet, have people in black tie, have Hollywood stars, but if the festival needs to keep the soul of Odessa, it needs to have the people of Odessa. So I want to go to Приватбанk and hear somebody saying, I saw a terrible film last night, or a great film, or whatever, but at least to connect with the fact that this is, you know, the city of Odessa is not a red carpet. It's not just red carpet. Yes, I've heard about the festival, but I've never been there. And again, I know that the molodist means youth.
Yeah.
So it's again emphasizing, you know, the freshness and the experimental cinema. But most big film festivals don't happen in the capital city of the place of the country. Cannes is not the capital of France. Venice is not the capital of Italy. Rotterdam.
Berlin is a capital, John.
Berlin is a special thing. You know, in Britain we have Edinburgh Film Festival, which is of course the capital of Scotland, but that's the whole thing. So yes, I think there is room in Ukraine for several film festivals, and each one should develop its own personality. The danger is that when everybody takes as the model Cannes and Berlin and Venice, you know, these festivals are 70 years old, 60 years old. And if film festivals are going to continue to exist, they have to adapt. And I don't mean show digital films or have everything downloaded on your phone. What I mean is they have to just think of new ways to present films to the people that can go and see them, or to attract different audiences. Because as I say, what you essentially have here with the red carpet is an idea which was developed in the 1930s, 1940s. And some aspects of that are good, but you know, this is 2014, and do we have to do things the same everywhere? You know, you should, as soon as you go on the Odessa Film Festival, you should think, I could only be in Odessa. And I don't just mean there's the Duke holding out his hand for donations.